And here we are with this is chapter 8 of the ILP book, Integral Life Practices. And I'm your host, Larry O'Connor. And here we go with Karen and Tiffany. And I'm going to start out by I've got my notes here, which I have sent you both PDF copies of. And I'm going to start reading through that. These are almost always uh, word for words, but they are excerpts. So sentences have been butchered to make this happen. Um, but I think they're still accurate. So the first thing that's discussed in this chapter is the need for integral ethics. Why are we bothering? What is this? What do we call? What is integral ethics, and why do we need it? So they start out by saying integral ethics is the art of being a good person. It's the practice of goodness in our everyday lives, and where we must make difficult, complicated choices and nuanced judgments about what is right and wrong, where we must grapple with moral dilemmas in politics, sexuality, health, relationships, work, money, and sometimes life and death situations. Integral ethics provides a framework for thinking about how we live and for making the best moral decisions we can. It also makes sense of people's different ethical structures by using the AQAL uh, teachings here, AQAL. And finally, integral ethics is a practice, a moment-to-moment endeavor to embody sincere care and actualize our deep institutions of the good in our life and in the world at large. These are their words, not mine coming up. But isn't that boring? Moral values and ethics are buzzwords for enforced conformity. So what they're about to describe here is what I would call what are the common understandings we have about this. In my learning, oftentimes when approaching something new, I say, what is the story I have about these words already? Kicking around in the back of my head because I want to bring them forward so they don't act as assumptions. So, um, moral values and ethics are buzzwords for enforced conformity. At integral levels of awareness, ethics and morality become a creative manifestation of conscious freedom
Mm.
and a natural expression of of enlightened self-interest. Integral ethics aims to increase the health of any particular level while also gently encouraging growth to higher, more encompassing levels. Okay, so far so good. Now, at this point in the book, they also make a nice little chart here, and I put that in the notes. And that chart shows the level, the complexity of the perspective in terms of first, second, third, and fourth person, which matches up nice with the AQAL box we'll see later. And the focus as well of from me to us to all human beings to all sentient beings, etc. And the colors are lined up on this too: magenta, amber, orange, green, and teal. And but the levels themselves: egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, multi-world-centric, and cosmos-centric. Okay, so we're using what we learned so far to approach ethics. Okay, now there is a topic: the assault on ethics. And here's an interesting thought here that there are 4 bullet points they came across for the way ethics is being assaulted, and that is academic, psychology, spirituality, and culture. Okay. In academics, developmental history levels are not given consideration in morality discussions. Yeah, well, where nobody's talked about this yet in AQAL terms, huh? Um, and in psychology, the psychology fails to give sufficient emphasis to the importance of conscience and self-critical discernment. You see, the feel I'm getting from that is we don't, conscience is something I think we all believe we have, but we don't really talk about it the way we talk about um, levels of spirituality or something like that. It's not kind of in the soup yet. And when we ask somebody on the street in the culture of our world about what is ethics, they're liable to give answers that have reference to what we would call legal protection. So we're narrowed down to that almost instinctively. And
Mhm.
these four things, academic psychology, spirituality, and culture, are four areas where we do have preconceived notions, the way things have always been, to approach in deciding what's going to come next. Okay, so these are the dominant perspectives on ethics. They are inadequate, as if our only options were conformity to social conventions or amoral pragmatism or quote unquote, whatever is right for you, moral relativism. Okay, so we got three nice little things. For some reason, when they used the word inadequate in that sentence, I immediately flashed to this movie, The Graduate, where Anne Bancroft says to Dustin Hoffman, "Well, just because you're inadequate in some areas doesn't mean you're adequate." And he goes, "Inadequate." You know, so that's why that picture's in there of Anne Bancroft. And okay, so anyway, so we must discover a higher ethical sensibility. The intention to relate to others with consciousness and care is implicit in the desire to engage integral life practice in the first place. Ethical practice naturally shows up in every moment of life. Okay, so how about a framework for integral ethics? We've kind of danced around it already, huh?
Mhm.
Um, but here's the bullets I got out of this in terms of growing ethically. Eros, E-R-O-S, is simply a way of interpreting one of the most essential, profound, and mysterious tendencies of the cosmos. There could be other ways of describing this force, but clearly something is at work. The important point is that as we tune in, our circle of care widens to include more and more perspectives. Vertical ethical practice calls us to align with the evolutionary grain of the cosmos. Horizontal ethical space, or as horizontal ethical practice, calls us to extending it into more areas of our life. So, since you can always express your care more, there's always room for horizontal ethical practice. So I'm starting to see that this three dimensionality of thinking about ethics. Okay. Now, the basic moral intuition, a useful principle of practicing integral ethics is to protect and promote the greatest depth for the greatest span. Okay, we're picturing um, this as it sounds to me like it fits right in with what we do here. We're going in three dimensions here. So now here's some new ideas here. Ground, intrinsic, and relative value. Integral ethics recognizes three distinct kinds of value: ground value, where every entity is an expression of absolute spirit; intrinsic value, which is the developmental depth of each one of those; and relative value, which is its usefulness in a specific context. So we might be able, after a while, to be using these words in the way we speak about integral ethics of ground values, intrinsic values, and relative values. Everybody okay so far? Okay.
Yeah.
And all right. So the next thing they talk about is meeting ethical dilemmas. Integral ethics points us in the direction of the upward trending developmental grain of the universe, or eros, as we said, we are using these words, uh, grounded with an intention to preserve the health and well-being of the whole. All, and the word we use for that is agape. So we're introducing these words that have been used before in integral theory for our ethics work as well. Now, here's where we can get into some diagrams and maybe some discussion, but I'm going to hold this up. These are also in the notes. There are two, we have these two, I don't know, does that look backwards to you?
No,
Okay,
that's the way I see it in the book.
okay, yeah.
I'm,
Um,
I'm following the
I
book.
mean the print is looks to me like it's going from right to left, but you're
We're
okay, good.
we're seeing it accurately.
Great.
At least
Okay,
I am.
so we've got those two ideas, the square thing, and then a focus on the upper quadrants there.
Mhm.
So in the so we have and I'm going to just read how they describe it. In terms of the four quadrants, we've got morality, ethics, behavior, and laws in those. And here we go. Upper left, I, cognition, science, oh, cognition, conscience, self-reflection. This is the place where shadow work happens, the removing emotional distortions and unwarranted assumptions from your judgments. It's also the place of intrapsychic ethics. Are you truthful with yourself? Do you hold yourself accountable? Are you compassionate to yourself? That's why they used intra and not inter, right? Okay. Um, Upper right quadrant, it. The questions we ask here are: what are your behaviors? What are their larger impacts? How do you treat the world? Lower level, we. That has to do with nurturing and evolving we spaces in general. They bullet it out quite a bit, but that's what we're talking about. And the lower right quadrant, the its quadrant, ITS, how does my behavior affect the system? How can we make this system serve the greatest depth for the greatest span? Okay. Um, Boy, I still feel like a newbie at this, but I got a feeling I know what they're talking about, and I bet you guys do too. So, all right, now we go to the art of integral ethics. Three reasons for living ethically. One is feeling good by doing good. Living ethically keeps your entanglements to a minimum, which keeps your consciousness clearer and your subtle energy body healthy and open. You literally feel better. Okay.
Mhm.
So, okay. Second of all, the second reason of three is transforming to higher stages of awareness. Post conventional ethical motives capable of thinking in terms of paradoxes, shades of gray, contradictions, and competing values. So I take it that they collectively call these post-conventional ethical motives. Are you is that consistent with your thought? Okay. So, and the third thing is the third reason for living ethically is ethical living creates a container for awakening. So just because you have awakened from the dream of karmic existence doesn't mean that dream goes away. Ethical living prevents the dream from becoming a nightmare.
Yeah. There's a lot a lot to say about this.
Well, this is a good place to stop and chat. Um, so why don't you say a few things about that?
Yeah, these three reasons for living ethically. First of all, Tiffany, do you have any comments at this point?
Please.
Yeah, I resonate with this whole chapter. I mean, this makes it's living. It's wow, this is interesting. This is juicy. So the even though this is presented fairly theoretically, the other three editors besides Wilbur have done a really good job of taking Wilbur's extraordinary meta theory and putting it into terms that um, normal people can access, not just a few high-powered nerds. And this thing about ethics is the three reasons. One, number one, feeling good by doing good specifically. This is where I really start, where the little my beanie starts really spinning here, because this is also the basis. This is the basis of the Buddha's radical insight that we really are one being, you know, all of the world's wisdom traditions, and condensed into practical modes of living. Nonviolent communication uses this as the basis. The, the most positive thing we can do, what makes us feel better than anything else, better than any physical indulgence or emotional relationship or achievement in the world, what makes us as essential beings happier than anything else is contributing to the well-being of ourselves or other living beings, the genuine well-being of other living beings. This is part of the Buddha's radical insight because we're not separate. Contributing to the genuine well-being of beings, ourselves or others, is makes us feel better than anything else. And what's his name? Rosenberg put this into a series of practices called nonviolent communication, which is a very practical recipe for dealing with life. Uh, and so this feeling good by doing good, this is yes. And I would take this even further and deeper by saying the most positive thing we can do for ourselves or for anybody else is contribute to their genuine well-being. And this is the basis of integral ethics. But we get unstuck from dogmatic ethics, which is just a rigid code of prescriptions. But this takes us deeper, which is messier, which means we have to use our own discernment to figure out what that is, which it's easier just to follow a recipe, right? So, so living ethically simultaneously benefits both you and everyone in your life. It enables you to live most happily, bless others freely, and so on, to do good in the world. And we feel good by doing good. So this is like emphatic. This is basically by way of an emphatic yes. And then this get and numbers 2 and 3 here, transforming to higher stages of awareness, and then ethical living creates a container for awakening. My first thought was, aren't those the same thing? But then I thought transforming to higher stages is more like the interior, the subjective, that I can, this is the growing up, the waking up and the growing up, the waking up, transforming and to higher stages of awareness. That's waking up and growing up inside myself. But then the number 3, ethical living creates a container for awakening. And where he takes, that was a little more abstract. I thought, well, maybe that's kind of a community. That would be like um, a lower part of the quadrants. But then I saw he takes it immediately to something that I have a lot of ex personal lived experience with, especially in a post-conventional ethical context that can easily give rise. Okay, I'll take it back. This section starts by saying some openings into higher awareness confer a sense of mind-blowing freedom. Especially in a post-conventional ethical context, that can easily give rise to a subtle arrogance, the tacit sense that we are now operating beyond karma. This is a huge error. This is how so many really advanced spiritual teachers and communities have gone badly, badly, badly off the rails to the degree that Chogyam Trungpa's chosen successor um, ended up conveying aids to some of his disciples. He thought he was beyond just literally, and this was development. He kind of inherited Chogyam Trungpa's shadow. There's big shadow in Chogyam Trungpa, and his designated successor was not an alcoholic like Chogyam Trungpa, but he would he was bisexual. And when individual seekers would come to him, just, oh, I have a private audience with the guru, he would turn them into sexual encounters that the seeker was not there for, not expecting, but they walked in, they were wide open. And his name, gosh, I've forgotten his name now, but I mean, he was, this to him, he was transmitting, right? He was transmitting higher spiritual states. This was in the early 80s. One of them had AIDS. This was before AIDS was understood. He caught AIDS in one of these, and then he transmitted AIDS, I think, to at least one, but maybe more than one. So it's not just kind of being sexually taken advantage of by a sexual predator in the guise of a spiritual teacher. And the man, Özal Tenzin was the name given him by Chogyam Trungpa, and this is in the public record. This is one of the most horrific examples, but there's so many examples. And so here we go. This is page 270 and 271 in Integral Life Practice, right? Diagnosis. What goes wrong? Ethical, and so some openings into higher awareness confer a sense of mind-blowing freedom. Yes, at those higher states and even structure stages, there is that opening into absolute freedom. This does not free us from the importance of ethical behavior. If anything, we have to be even more. And I've had this argument in some integral circles that, oh, once we get into third tier, we're beyond more ethics. I'm like, no, no. Wrong answer. I think we all know of examples, so that's my impassioned burble here. And I see Tiffany nodding.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you mentioned Trump, and then I think of Trump and I think of the Epstein class on the very red level. They are manifesting the same thing where it's like they're they're not being held accountable at each of these levels of ethical responsibility and impact and how power and privilege and, parts of ourselves, our shadow play in to how we actually understand our actions and our ethics and our impact. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
eh, it's part of the paradox and the conundrum. It's like there are certain things that have so heavily relied on black and white thinking for so long, and yet this is like the building of our awareness and development is about being able to get into a pluralistic, right? This is the worlds, this is the cosmos-centric, where it's like we start to understand things from multiple lenses, multiple levels, multiple interpretations and timelines. And I think that one of the valuable things that I'm seeing in this is like one of the things says, it's not about what you did, but what you do next. And knowing that that's actually a huge part of um, our growth and our challenge in growth is to forgive ourselves and also hold people accountable. So those who
mhm,
think they're beyond their ethics, we need to be able to be empowered to actually hold them accountable.
yes,
And I think a lot of people on like a spiritual path, there's obviously a lot of spiritual bypassing that can happen when you get turned on in that, in certain levels that give you a greater freedom than you've experienced. But then being able to translate that into other people's freedom and how do you ensure that for others without becoming dogmatic? And yeah, just thinking about how education, psychology, culture, these in those, categories, those are also the places where law and dogma and the way that we think about and interpret existence and how we are existing and what that right and wrong might be. Um, it's all just very fascinating to me at this, at this point in what we're experiencing, collectively, um, recognizing that we actually do have to create a standard of ethics that is both reflexive and capable of a complexity, but that doesn't undercut, like that breaks down the power. It reassesses the way that power is currently consolidated and empowers more people to have that, be in that relationship. Right now things are so extremely fragmented, it feels like,
Yeah.
into this
Yeah.
inequitable, hierarchy that's not sustainable. And part of that is all of the, it's like it's people taking back that power, deciding what their right and wrong is underneath. To me, integral in ways that it's like about practice and becoming. It's also, so much of this work is about the deconditioning. It's about the understanding why we even think and act the way we do, and what
Hmm.
are those underlying things that might not be desirable, but how do we satisfy those things in ways that aren't harmful? And even like having that conversation is really hard for people when they just think things are right or wrong or they impact them a certain way. It gets more and more difficult for people to get into those, other worlds. Um, so I'm interested to see how do we effectively do this in ways that isn't oppressive.
Yeah. 'Cause we need some common understanding of, like, I think of those rules of the road. What are our standards of behavior? Where is the line that in our social, in our culture and our social structures, the lower two quadrants. We need some common understanding on what lines do we not allow to be crossed. And yet, how do we avoid imposing a power structure yeah, I mean, how to deal with the complexity?
Yeah.
It stops being simple once we get beyond right and wrong. Larry, looked like you were about to say something.
Well, Tiffany, what you were referring to, I think, was now we've got this book is like 2006, right?
Yeah.
20 years ago. Now another book comes out, Finding Radical Wholeness, and Wilbur goes into depth about saying waking up is not growing up.
Uh-huh.
So that's the territory we're in right now. And so it's gone from this this discussion of, hey, wait a minute, just because you've achieved enlightenment doesn't mean you get to have sex with anybody you want and tell them anything, you know?
Right.
Um, so and it fleshes out and yeah, there's lots of examples of people doing shadow work, and then you get so good at shadow work that you think that you might as that you're at some other plane. This kind of relativism, it's kind of what makes me afraid to think too much turquoise. I don't think I'm ready to be turquoise yet, so um
In fact, I will actually name the name my dear friend and colleague Andrew Rook, who runs the Turquoise discussion on integral life. I mean, he actually, this is where I come at him. He says, when we get to turquoise, we're beyond ethics. And I'm going,
ooh.
wait. Let's be careful what we're saying here. Dogmatic ethics, amber level, right, wrong. Okay, we're beyond that. However, if anything, we need to be even more meticulous about ethical behavior as we go up into the higher stages, because as we get more powerful, we can abuse power more powerfully. So that's an ongoing kind of thing between me. So yes, turquoise. Let's be careful here because it can start. And I have, oh my gosh, my spiritual community. I've had the experience of people who have meditated so much they've developed cities. You know, the spiritual powers. And they thought they were beyond right and wrong, and they abused them. Let me tell you, a narcissist who has paranormal spiritual powers is really a scary person. And they're operating, they've achieved these higher, you know, when it's part of their stage structure, but they have a fault, they have been seduced by what it says here, that the tacit sense that they're operating beyond karma. Oh, I'm beyond karma now, so I can do whatever I want to. Whoa, flashing red light. This is
Mhm.
can get real. My God, spiritual narcissists I have known. I mean, this is why spiritual communities go off the rails, even with highly achieved spiritual teachers who can transmit spiritual states at will. They can go off the rails this way, and they can do some of the most harm. So this, as you can see, this is something that really pushes a button for me.
Right. Well, and because so many people's religious uh orientation is through authoritarian, it's like the or authoritarian all-knowing God,
Mhm.
uh, I think that then tendency to give away our power, it's like let God take it, let the spiritual, it's like there's a vulnerability. There's so much vulnerability in anything that's telling you to to give your power to it and
And a
to,
lot of people would like to find someone
yeah,
to give their power to.
yeah. It would, I mean, this is one of the main conversations around AI, it's an artificial sense of reality that, we can control and program, which I I just don't believe is fully real. It requires us to give up a certain power to this thing outside of us that's completely reliant on aspects of our reality that, I don't think we can just bypass. I don't know. I think that, there's certain struggles that we have to endure, and um I don't think there's any, saviorism in this. I don't think that there's anything that's going to save us. Like, we collectively are,
Yeah,
we're in it. So we're it.
we're it.
We're it, baby.
Up to us.
So, with that what you will. But so many people think I think a lot of people just they want things to be a certain way. And we were conditioned for a long time to think that we can just, through imperialism, colonization, that we can just create a world in which everything is controlled and owned. And that's led to extreme inequity but amongst also the most um, authenticity. We've got 8 billion people, and they keep on running, trying to jam us through the same mold, but we choose our own paths, and we
Yeah.
become, we do awaken, we do grow. Like, there are these opportunities to transform. So I'm not completely discounting AI. I respect Bet's love of AI. Um, but I also am an anarchist and don't trust any all-encompassing capturing
Yeah.
systems that serve to make our lives into something else. That's our job.
And a good reason to be afraid of those things happening is because everything so far has been operated from traditional understandings of
Yes.
ethics that are not integral, that don't take in the nuances. So there's a reason why the first 10 pages of this thing happened in this chapter, to flesh this out, because that's where we have to go back to in
Mhm.
order to avoid what you're talking about. Which brings us to the costs of unethical behavior. Right here we are. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So, like it or not, You are keenly aware of the difference between your actions that do and do not meet your own internal ethical standards. Experiencing psychic pain when you feel your unethical behavior. It's an inner monitor. So um, I'm just going to say, I think it's possible that some people have shut off that inner monitor, and we would call them intrinsically evil. But in fact, a more accurate way of saying it is if this does exist, if this is factory default, comes with the package, then some people are disconnecting it.
Yes.
Uh, and
Yes.
and we know that the famous people on TV who are all doing that in March of 2026 right now, that would be good examples. So I want to keep going here. Um, our ethical lapses are connected to unhappy, unskillful states of mind. We act in the we act the worst when we feel our worst.
Yes.
Unethical actions reinforce unskillful states of mind. Our most ethical behavior propagates positive, happy, skillful states of mind and emotion. So, what they're saying is if we don't disconnect our morality, our ethical, generically coming right from our birth, we're going to have experiences when we don't act ethically. Our conscience or something, our guardian angel, call it what you will, is there. And we've got short-term and long-term costs that they bulleted out. The
Mhm.
short-term costs are states of mind that are unhappy, contracted, and unskillful. The long-term costs are a cycle of lies, self-contempt, and denial that erodes integrity and virtue. Okay. When we do things we don't respect, we generate defenses, hide our ethical lapses, and give rise to upsetness that saps energy.
Yeah.
Self deception results in psychological repression, building layers of unconscious conflict. It adds to the shadow.
In a painful way.
hmm Okay. The bag of stuff that we carry around, as sometimes it's referred to. Um, and I put a marker here for this is on page 276. This uh, quote, mature integral ethics must inhabit both masculine and feminine compassion when appropriate. And I didn't think about this as being masculine, feminine, and stuff. So here's a little detail. Feminine compassion expresses itself, and this is four guys here, if I'm not mistaken, about to say this, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
feminine compassion expresses itself as acceptance, care, nurturance, and sweetness. Masculine compassion expresses itself as discrimination, challenge, setting limits, and ruthless truth telling, all motivated by love.
Mhm.
I'm cool with that. Are you ladies cool with that?
I would substitute discernment. What is it? If for just discriminate the word where he says discrimination, I would substitute the word discernment.
Mm.
But otherwise, actually, yes, I'm cool with that. I would, yeah, as stated. I
Any
have no
comments from
quibbles.
the anarchists?
No, I think I always have I think even the idea of the masculine feminine traits are very much we're too many years into patriarchy to really it's good enough. It's good
Tease it
enough
apart.
for what it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay. We're working
I think that
definitions.
part of that pluralism is that you know, tendencies that get ascribed as masculine and feminine how they manifest in people. I just feel like they're too coded, like they're unnecessarily coded. I feel like it creates an extra layer of bifurcation that people then have to reconcile within themselves, knowing that's like we all have, people have different traits. It's not your sexual orientation, it's not your gender identity, it's not your, born birth. It's like, you know.
It's more abstract and universal, like agency and communion, yin and yang.
I'd be curious if now, like, if there's people now, I bet you there's folks who are taking it outside of that binary, is all I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
who are expanding beyond that bifurcation into something a little more emblematic of the expression.
Okay, well, they call it masculine and feminine. They're talking about compassion. Ethics must have compassion. And here's a bunch of bullets, and we've sorted them into two categories called male and female
Mm.
for the hell of it, because they tend to be that way. And certainly, um, in understanding men who are like, as a straight man, for me to understand a gay man would involve appreciating the um the amount of the feminine descriptions here as being more ready to hand than I would have ready to hand. Okay. A simple example is the guy, you tell the guy something, he always wants to try and figure it out. He doesn't want to sit and empathize. You have to tell him, shut up
Fix
and
it.
listen to me, in order for him to shut up and listen, because it's just not going to be the first thing I reach for in my bag of tricks when somebody's talking to me. So those, there we are.
Yeah, I had a more general comment here as we talking about the short-term costs and the long-term costs, and I'm thinking karma. What this is describing is in the practical external world of our experience of normal people who don't think in abstruse spiritual terms. They're describing the effects of karma. If you treat other people, but what goes around comes around. The costs, the deception has high costs, the short-term costs, the long-term costs. And what I was kind of wanting to see here something that they actually come to at the end of the chapter, which is kind of the deeper basis as we grow spiritually, we start to see that we're not separate, and that when we harm another person or treat another person unethically, we're doing it to ourselves. Whatever we do to another person, we're doing to ourselves. And so we get the results, and you can call it poetic justice or whatever. And I was kind of wanting to see that layered in here, but then I found at the end of the chapter, they get there. So we'll get there too.
Okay, well, we've got 10 minutes to get there. Uh, and I will confess that as I got towards the end, I was trying to get to the end, so I may have missed what you said. But anyways, I've got this category here called completing your karmas. An operational definition for integral ethics in this context is don't create new negative karmas and complete what you can of the old. Okay.
Okay.
It's not what you did, it's what you do next. They've got
Yes.
a section here. Concealing our misdeeds only heaps penalties and interest onto the painful price we want to avoid paying in the first place. A key to authentic integral ethics is acceptance of your fallibility. Okay. Um, Ethics and your relationship to yourself. Abusive inner behavior towards oneself ranks high among the many psychological diseases of postmodern society.
You're here.
Okay. Masculine self-compassion. They did a little deeper, went a little deeper on both of the masculine and feminine here. Masculine self-compassion uh, characteristics include discernment, unflinching courage to face unpleasant realities, and discipline, willingness to choose and enforce new behaviors and habits. Okay, for lack, good enough for it to work with, right? Feminine self-compassion, the habit of negatives. They didn't bullet this out as much, but the takeaway I had was the habit of negative self-talk doesn't change easily. Soften and accept the inner abuser. This is about self-acceptance and forgiveness. Okay. And I wonder if we could see those as polarities, the way they're being described here, because we definitely need all of these things, but sometimes we need to be nicer to ourselves, and other times we need to be tougher with ourselves.
Yes.
The ethics of shadow work. In the process of owning our own projections, we become more fun to work and play with, which improves the way others treat us in return. I'd say this is a really big payoff for me, um, personally, but I'll get into it another day. Flying under altitude. Participating within a community of fellow integral life practitioners will hold us accountable to our true capabilities, flying at our highest authentic altitude. So that completes my notes.
Okay, and I will add on a couple pages further under expanded ethical responsibility at the top of 283. He finally gets to where I wanted to go back. In the high stage of awakening, we are aware of our inseparability from the entire evolving cosmos. Uh, and that's kind of, for me, the bottom line of integral ethics, of nonviolent communication, is the Buddha's radical insight that we're not separate from all that is, from other human beings. Therefore, whatever I do to another human being, I am doing to myself. And that's kind of the deeper understanding of karma. I am in that very act doing it to myself. And so I was really relieved to see that they got there. And I'll take that back one further step, backing up a couple of pages. We were talking about the negative, the merciless inner critic, the negative self-talk. Something I have realized in my involvements with human being is that when we have a merciless inner critic, even if it's largely unconscious, if it's still in the shadow, unconsciously we treat other people the way we treat ourselves unconsciously. So, and this is very much under the practical integral ethics as a practice, that the practice of working on our own inner self-critic is means that we're not only are we going to be happier, we'll treat ourselves better. In that act, we are going to be treating the people around us in healthier, happier ways too. So these are deep waters here. And
Well, and on that note, and to bring it kind of back to what you mentioned earlier, Karen, about like the doing good and feeling good, as somebody who is a born people pleaser, and like, I there were times that I used doing good to avoid how I felt about myself. And that took a lot of years of recognizing that no amount of good that I tried to do was changing that voice and that sense of myself, and that I had to be willing to go into those parts of myself and take care of it and, heal that relationship
yeah,
for any of the good I was trying to do to really have the effect or the impact that I hope it would. And so just the importance of toggling between that,
yeah,
that um, the reality of like, and for many people who are socialized as girls or women, that expectation that we're nice and that we meet these characteristics, that we do care about other people's needs before our own, in a lot of instances, that sacrificial
hmm,
role, which comes up for many people. But I just think that we all have work that we need to do, and understanding like, yeah, how much time we spend inside versus outside. Like if we're
yeah,
always acclimating to our internal work, like what are we like shutting ourselves off from in that outside world? And then in the same way, if we find ourselves most compelled to be at the service of others, not to discount that, but to recognize like what we might, need to do for ourselves in order to
Yeah.
be that more kind of faithful servant to the good.
Yeah.
And last thing is, in my martial arts training, the kind of phrase is be humble, train hard.
Mhm.
This humble humility, sense of grounding, sense of self, but having that discipline to like do your best and be your best, and you bring that, not even best, but to be yourself, to be most fully yourself in all facets of your existence is such a beautiful, thing to ask of people, instead of just like, how can you make, your life the best it can be. It's like, how can we make existence the best for everyone? And that's like a way different ethical consideration than I think we've been, taught. Like, we've been moving towards this individuation because we had to break out of something, that maybe was holding us in collective tendencies and traditional dogmas. And, it's like, I try not to discount what we're experiencing as the worst or as not part of that becoming, although, I hope we find nicer ways. More
I
loving ways.
see my sense of the individuation was our job as we came up through first tier.
Yeah.
Having separated into all these separate beings, now we are reintegrating them. And so the job of second and especially third tier is to reintegrate what was separate. But to go into separation and individuals was our task up through. And now we're coming together as a greater whole. Um,
And even accepting that as part of, like in my own self-talk, like the part of me that says you don't want to have those base desires, you don't want to, be compelled or compulsive, or, and it's like,
mhm.
that's true. But, you have to be aligned with what that is. And like, our greatest hope, I think, in this world is that empathy and compassion, and to see, not feed in to the hatred and the, destruction of it all, because like that darkness is like, it's very powerful and it's very alluring to just go back to nothingness where we didn't have to deal with anything. It
Hmm.
doesn't sound too bad right now, but
Sounds pretty good to me.
but at the same time, we're here. So what does that mean, and what do we want it to mean? And
But to look at all the darkness and the negative with the compassion that is an underlying theme of this whole chapter. And that's it's an interesting challenge, the challenge of our time. And this lays it hinted, but it didn't state that even we look at even evildoers with compassion. This was hinted in one places, a few places I underline. When we see what must have taken to drive these people to this horrific behavior, we understand how they have been abused in the past, maybe a past lifetime. Um, for this may be a little off topic, but when I look at somebody who is behaving horribly in ways that are harming others and themselves, I ask myself, what would it have taken to drive me to behave that way? And this is a psychotherapist trick, actually. I learned it from psychotherapists. Um, and that starts the insight into what happened to this person to drive this into behavior that ultimately is negative for themselves and is going to hurt them more than it hurt anybody else. The people who gain the power and abuse it are not happy human beings. And if you believe in any kind of karma, I mean, they're worse off than everybody else in the long run after all the harm they've done. So and this gets back to my kind of theme. Whatever we are doing to somebody else, we are by that act doing it to ourselves. It is going to come around. It comes around internally in our own and they go into it here. I mean, the fear and the shame and the self-hatred that is accumulating underneath where they don't see it. So anyway, yeah, a very juicy chapter for me at least.
Yeah, thank you, Larry, for the summation and
Yeah,
Karen for the insights. And
thank you.
yeah,
And thanks both of you for participating. And Next time we'll be doing living your life as practice, relationships, work, parenting, creativity, and other additional modules. So we'll cover all that in an hour next month. Uh, this is very juicy 30 pages we just did. Thanks.